Since the start of the 12th Black Crusade launched by Warmaster Abaddon the Despoiler, the Gothic Sector had been isolated by violent warp storms, turning it into a sequestered battlefield. For a long duration, the only barrier between the Chaos invaders and the surviving Imperial worlds was the heroic Battlefleet Gothic, led by Admiral von Ravensburg. However, with the fall of 3 Blackstone Fortresses, the Imperium's presence in the sector began to rapidly dwindle. By the year 147 M41, Abaddon had occupied nearly the entire Lysades subsector, enslaving its populations and seizing its orbital ports through brutal means. He recklessly coerced local planetary governments to resupply his invasion forces while keeping a predatory eye on the remaining 3 Blackstone fortresses. The key to the sector government's survival during this isolation lay in the continued trade and material transport between the remaining Imperial worlds. Thanks to the merchant fleets, these planets were able to assist one another, maintain production, and provide essential logistical support to Battlefleet Gothic. However, these vital lifelines were being strangled by increasingly rampant piracy. In addition to the long-standing threats of orcs and Eldari, a large number of pirate wolf packs emerged, composed of human renegades, former Navy and merchant sailors who had abandoned their faith in despair. Approximately 20 such human pirate groups converged in the Quinrox Sound. Leveraging their knowledge of Imperial logistics, they quickly grew in strength, amassing nearly 50 modified escort-class vessels, a captured Gothic-class cruiser, and 2 salvaged Lunar-class cruisers. This paradise for outlaws threatened to bleed Battlefleet Gothic dry of maintenance and supplies before Chaos could finish the job. Recognizing the urgency, Admiral von Ravensburg assigned the veteran Commodore Morndark the task of clearing the Sound. Morndark was granted high authority to organize a task force which eventually included an Overlord-class battlecruiser as his flagship, a Gothic-class cruiser, 2 Dauntless-class light cruisers, and dozens of supporting frigates and destroyers. To find the hidden pirate base, Morndark employed a clever ruse. He dispatched a large, unladen transport convoy to act as bait along the trade routes of the Quinrox Sound. When the pirates swarmed the prey, the Imperial task force sprang from hiding and routed them.
Morndark intentionally allowed one pirate ship to escape, tracking it back to their secret base in the barbarous Costa system. The subsequent Imperial assault was overwhelming. Faced with the Navy's superior firepower, the pirates were granted no mercy and were obliterated along with their ships. When survivors fled to the surface of Barbarous Third, the Imperial fleet deployed atmospheric incineration torpedoes against the defenseless world, ending the engagement with absolute finality. With the cancer of the human pirates removed, the Gothic Sector Command could focus on the primary war, though Orc pirates remained active in the Cyclops cluster, inadvertently acting as a buffer against the spread of chaos in that region. As the war progressed, Abaddon's fleet of damnation began to exhibit the typical fractures of chaos forces, with various warbands breaking off to pursue their own interests. Since the failure of the Horus Heresy, the traitor legions had shattered, and their Daemon primarchs, now pure warp entities, cared more for the great game of the Chaos Gods than their former legions. Abaddon maintained this unstable coalition only through the shared goal of toppling the Imperium and the promise of plunder. Realizing the enemy was now dispersed, Admiral von Ravensburg launched a decisive counteroffensive in 15-1 M41. Despite being outnumbered, he consolidated his scattered ships into a single massive hammer to strike the isolated Chaos fleets one by one, even though this weakened planetary defenses and convoy escorts elsewhere. The pivotal engagement occurred in the Gethsemane system. Following a week-long hunt, Ravensburg's task force of 17 capital ships and 20 escorts trapped a Chaos fleet. Imperial Firestorm-class frigates successfully scouted the enemy main body hiding within a nebula, allowing for a full-scale assault. Cobra-class destroyers harassed the enemy flanks, forcing the Chaos ships into the teeth of the Imperial line. The traitors lost 4 battleships and 11 escorts in the brutal exchange. As the survivors attempted to flee, a massive Eldari fleet suddenly materialized in their path. Recognizing that Abaddon's possession of the Blackstone Fortresses, known to them as the Talismans of Vaul, threatened the entire galaxy, the Eldari joined the fray and annihilated the remaining traitors.
In the aftermath, Ravensburg signed a ceasefire with the Eldari, forging an alliance that allowed the Imperial Navy to use webway gates for rapid deployment, bypass warp interference, and gain a massive strategic advantage. By the end of 15.1.M41, the warp storms began to recede, allowing Imperial reinforcements to finally reach the sector. However, the true climax arrived at the Schindlegheist system, where Abaddon moved to seize the 5th Blackstone Fortress. His plan was to repeat the catastrophes of Phalaris and Tarantis by targeting the sun to destroy the system. In the ensuing Battle of Schindlegheist, both sides suffered terrible casualties. Space Marines conducted suicidal boarding actions, and thousands of mortal sailors perished. Despite the commitment of the Imperium and its Eldari allies, the 3 Blackstone Fortresses under Abaddon's control remained seemingly invulnerable. As the battle neared its end on the 3rd day, Abaddon's forces broke through the final defense line and positioned the fortresses above the star. At the brink of total disaster, Captain Abridal of the Overlord-class battlecruiser Flame of Purity performed a heroic sacrifice. He moved his ship directly into the convergence point of the Blackstone Fortresses and overloaded his void shields, creating a massive energy surge that temporarily disabled the alien station's defenses. Seizing this window, Ravensburg ordered every available ship to launch boarding actions against the now vulnerable fortresses. Seeing the tide turn, Abaddon ordered a retreat. 2 Blackstone Fortresses were covered by his fleet and escaped into the warp, but a 3rd was seized by Astartes from the Angels of Redemption chapter and Mortal Commandos. However, as Imperial personnel began their inspection, the fortress self-destructed, taking the boarders with it. Reports soon followed that all 4 Blackstone Fortresses remaining in the sector had self-destructed simultaneously as Abaddon fled. Some later theorized that Abaddon used an ancient Xenos controller to trigger the self-destruct remotely, as the fortresses he later wielded in the 13th Black Crusade were noted to be entirely devoid of their original alien intelligence. The Gothic War ended with the victory at Schindlegheist, though Abaddon escaped with 2 fortresses to the Eye of Terror. While the main threat was gone, scattered Chaos warbands remained, leading to several more years of cleanup.
One notable threat was the Chaos Captain Malefica Arkham, who commanded the Planet Killer. While Abaddon was at Schindlegheist, Arkham had been sent to attack the Aramospi system as a distraction. After Abaddon's retreat, Arkham broke free of command and established a small empire on Gonacrash in the Quinrox Sound, enslaving the world to satisfy his twisted desires. His reign ended when he was intercepted by an Imperial battle group. Lacking escorts, the slow Planet Killer was destroyed by Lunar-class cruisers in a running battle. It took another 8 years for the Imperium to fully purge the remnants of the war. Chaos warbands were driven into the deep void, and the Imperial Guard reclaimed planet surfaces, while the Ecclesiarchy returned to preach on ruined lands. While the scars of the 20-year conflict would take centuries to heal, the heroes were honored. A massive monument was erected on Terra in the Hall of Heroes, bearing the name of every individual who served in Battlefleet Gothic. The Eldari alliance ended with the war, as both sides knew they would eventually return to being enemies. In the galaxy, there are no permanent allies, only survival. As the 41st millennium progressed, even greater threats emerged: rising new civilizations, the arrival of the Tyranids, and the awakening of the ancient Necrons. The age of total war was far from over.